There are very few things in life so sad as going through the motions of doing a task with no higher purpose in mind. And yet that is what hundreds of millions of people do every single day of their lives. They go off to their workplace and they go through the motions like zombies. And then they come home like the Walking Dead. They flop down on the sofa or in bed and watch TV for 3 or 4 hours as though in a coma. And then they drift off to sleep. And they dream about a life that actually has meaning and purpose. Yet they wake up the next morning, they reset the clock, and they do it all over again. Day after day, year after year, with no higher objective in mind than just growing old and paying the bills. But you dare not, and you need not allow that to happen to you, because you are a lion. You have a mission. You have a purpose. You have devoted yourself to a noble cause, one that is utterly worthy of the investment of this, your one and only life. And if you are going to lead your club to do things that others deem impossible, it is going to be because you have decided that you are going to lead your club not toward a meeting, but toward a mission. So the first piece of advice I would give you today is to lead toward a mission, not a meeting. All great leaders are obsessed by what I call a magical dream, and it is each leader's ability to infect the people around them with that dream that determines in large measure how effective that leader can become. Let me tell you something. The factor that will determine how much impact you have in your club and in your community will not be so much your personality, your IQ, your looks, or your talent, or even the number of hours you invest, though that is very important. It will be determined by the nature and the intensity of your motivation. All highly influential people are driven by a magical dream. For Alexander the Great, it was to conquer the world. For the founding fathers, it was to create a free society. For Abraham Lincoln, it was to end slavery and preserve the Union. No one in the modern era has said it better than Martin Luther King Jr., who 5 decades ago stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and declared, "I have a dream that this nation under God shall rise up and live out the true meaning of her creed, that all men are created equal." And decent people of all races, not just African Americans, followed because they were swept up in the magic of his dream. They lived off the overflow of his passion. They took his goose pimples, they put them on their own bodies until they could internalize and articulate and own the dream for themselves. Now, I've got great news for you. Your dream doesn't have to be quite that magical, because you don't need 50 million people to buy into it to make it come true. You just need the people that surround you in your club to catch fire with the vision of service to their fellow man to make it come true. Let me ask you a question. Is there a fire burning in your belly to help kids, to serve your fellow man, to improve your community? Does it burn so brightly that it keeps you awake nights? And when you finally fall asleep, do you find yourself dreaming about it? And when you wake up in the morning, is it one of the first thoughts on your mind? And as you go through your day, do you find yourself scheming and dreaming about ways to do it better? If you don't have that type of a passion and you can't get it, you will never be the leader you could otherwise be, because you will never give your club members a disease that you don't already have. Club presidents, listen carefully, and this goes for zone chairmen and district governors too. The best thing you can do for your club is to set yourself on fire. And after you do, curious people will gather around just to watch you burn. But before long, the ones closest to you will be unable to help but to spontaneously combust, and then they will do the same with their friends. You will start a chain reaction, and you will no longer just have a meeting or merely a club. You will have a movement. You must never allow yourself to forget why you do what you do. And you must never allow your club members to become so caught up in the mundane details of trying to run a club that they forget at a higher level the difference they are making in the lives of millions and millions of people. There was once a monk who was overseeing a church building project. He went out to the construction site to see how progress was coming, and while there, he saw 4 men chipping stones. He asked the first, "My son, what are you doing?" The man scowled. He said, "Father, I'm chipping stones." He turned to the second. He said, "My son, what are you doing?" The man matter-of-factly said, "Father, I'm building a wall." He walked over to the third man. He said, "My son, what are you doing?" The man smiled. He said, "Father, I'm constructing a cathedral." He approached the fourth. He said, "My son, what are you doing?" The man's face lit up with all of the glory of heaven. He positively beamed as he said, "Father, I'm advancing the kingdom of God on earth, one stone at a time." Here are four men doing exactly the same job, but with a totally different passion level, and probably a different quality level, and certainly a different job satisfaction level. I believe that it is your solemn duty as a leader in the Lions Club to ruthlessly discipline yourself every time that you plan or attend an activity or a meeting, to discipline yourself to give that fourth level of an answer. I wonder if I was to walk up to one of you in disguise 6 months from now and just casually ask you what you're doing, how would you reply? I'm sending out the same freaking reminder email about the same freaking meetings that we've been holding in the same freaking building for 25 freaking years. And that's longer than freaking has even been a word. Or would you say, I'm making sure that kids grow up seeing instead of blind, that poor people can live in houses instead of under bridges, that disabled children can go to camp just like all of their peers do, that people who have been devastated by disasters can get back on their feet and rebuild, that people can live healthy into their 80s and 90s instead of being cut off in their 50s by diabetes or some imminently curable condition. I'm working to make sure that my community survives and thrives another 50 or 100 or 500 years rather than dying a slow and hideous death. I'm transforming the world one freaking email, one freaking meeting, one freaking kid site screening at a time. Don't ever allow yourself to forget why you do what you do. You are moving the world. That's why you go to your meetings. You can't go to a meeting because you think you can have a better meeting. You go to the meeting motivated by a drive to transform the world. Every great organization like this one was started by a single individual, a man or a woman, an individual with a magnificent obsession. And they burned so brightly with it, they spread it to a group of other people around them. Please forgive the masculine forms. These principles apply equally well to both genders, but I use it because our founder, Melvin Jones, was himself a man, and all of his early followers were men from other men's organizations around Chicago a century ago. But these like-minded individuals begin to start a movement. They start slowly, they have momentum, and then it becomes a great movement of humanity. And they put their heads together and they come up with the best methods available and they refine them constantly. But this is where the rub is. This is the most dangerous stage of an organization. It is the method stage which becomes the fulcrum on which the future of any organization or any club will pivot. Because it is at that stage, somewhere in the method stage, that all of the founders die off, or they move away, or they retire, or they pass the torch to a new generation of leaders who are well equipped with the method but may not be quite as on fire about the mission. And a subtle change takes place, atrophy sets in, and they're no longer as concerned about the mission as they are about carrying out the method for its own sake. And then from there, it's a pretty quick drop to the fifth and almost terminal stage of an organization, the machine. When you get to the machine stage, the mission is secondary. The primary purpose is to keep the machine running. The goal is not to fulfill the dream. The goal is to have a better machine, a bigger machine, a prettier machine, a more well-funded machine, a better oiled machine, a more enviable machine. But it never does anything. Have you ever owned an automobile with a dieseling problem? You shut it off at the ignition, but it keeps running, sputtering and chugging along there in your driveway, accomplishing nothing, going nowhere, but just using up fuel. That's this type of an organization. And when an organization reaches that stage, it is inevitable that it moves to the final stage of an organization, and that is the memorial. It's just a shell of the organization that once was. It's a mausoleum that houses the ashes of a great movement that used to be. But there is a silver lining, because almost always at this stage, there is an individual sitting among the ashes that gets disillusioned. There's that word. Disgusted with the whole fiasco, they reacquaint themselves with the mission, and then they reignite it. If the organization is small enough, they ignite it within the organization. If it's huge, like many church organizations, church denominations that have gone full circle over a period of centuries, then they simply break away and they start a new organization with a new name but the same original mission, and the cycle repeats itself. Leaders, listen carefully. One of the most important things that you do as a leader is you make sure you never allow your club to move past the method stage. You fight it with everything that is within you. There is a relentless gravitational pull exerted on all organizations like ours to pull us down to that memorial stage. It works 24/7. It's like being on the down escalator trying to walk up. If you can keep up a brisk pace, if you can work hard enough and long enough, you can make headway and you can eventually reach the top. But if you stop at any point advancing the mission, the machine takes over and you lose all of your gains. So how do you keep that from happening? You preach the movement, not the method. You preach the mission constantly. Let me tell you something, folks. The purpose of a meeting is not to have a great meeting. The purpose of a Lions Club meeting is to plan ways to help more people. The purpose of the meeting is to inflame the members with a passion to go reach more people. The purpose is to train them how to do it, to remind them of the difference they're making in people's lives, and to knit them together into a team of 20 people that can achieve far more than they ever could working individually. There are two types of people in this world: net givers and net takers. A net giver is a person who plans on taking far more out of this world than they ever leave behind. But then there are the net givers. You and I are here in Omaha because we are the exact opposite. We long in our hearts to leave behind far more than we ever take out of this world. Let me tell you how to recruit a person like me. I've been deeply and proudly involved in Boy Scouting for the last 10 years, Cub Scouting and Boy Scouting. The thing that has given my life meaning this past decade is investing in those young boys and trying to find out ways to turn them into great men. But now my son's 17 and a half. He's just completed his Eagle Scout. He's moving out of the movement, and so am I. And I am looking for a new place to invest the next 10 or 20 years of my life. And there are many guys like me out there. Let me tell you how to recruit a guy like me into your club. First of all, I'll tell you how not to do it. Let's say that there's a guy named Jim that I know. He calls me, he says, "Hey, Billy, I'm in the Lions Club. We've got a meeting next Monday night. You want to come?" Well, I was kind of thinking I might stay home and watch the game Monday night, but I was secretly hoping somebody would invite me to a meeting. Not very effective. Here's another plan. Jim calls me on the phone and says, "You know that flood that came through here last week? Well, I'm in the Lions Club, and a bunch of us are going down this Saturday to help those poor people dig out and try and rebuild their lives. We could use all the help, all the bodies and hands that we can muster. Do you think you could help us out?" Well, you better believe I can. I'd be there in a heartbeat, and so would you. And after spending 4 or 6 or 8 hours helping these poor people dig out, Jim pulls me aside and he says, "We're the Lions Club. We're a service organization. We get together once a month for an hour to plan who we're going to help next and how we're going to do it. Can you spare an hour a month for that?" I am in like flint. That quickens my pulse. That's what I am about. Even if I wasn't a lion before, in name, I'm a lion in heart because I'm all about serving. Let me tell you why people are going to join your Lions Club. 2 reasons primarily. And just a hint, neither one of them is because of the intense psychological longing of the human soul to attend a meeting. The people that you want to build your organization on will join the Lions Club, 1, because they want to devote their life to a noble cause. That's what gives them meaning and fulfillment and purpose in life. And 2, they want to make friends with a bunch of like-minded people to share that journey. If you make sure that your meeting, every meeting, meets those 2 objectives, you will not just have a meeting anymore. You will not merely have a club. You will have a movement on your hands. And you will remind me of Leroy. You say, who's Leroy? Leroy was a trucker. Leroy was up for his biannual exam to see if he could keep his trucker's license. It was an oral exam that day. There were 3 men in business suits seated across the table from Leroy. They said, we're going to pose a hypothetical situation. We want you to tell us what you would do. They said, let's suppose you're driving an 18-wheeler down a windy 2-lane mountain road and your brake fails. What would you do? Leroy said, I would use my emergency brake. They said, that's very good, but suppose you're driving an 18-wheeler down a windy 2-lane mountain road when both of your brakes fail. What would you do? Leroy said, I would flash my lights, honk my horn, and look for a runaway truck ramp. They said, that's very good, but suppose you're driving an 18-wheeler down a windy 2-lane mountain road when both of your brakes fail and your electrical system fails, so you have no lights or horn. You know from past experience there is no runaway truck ramp on this highway. You cannot pull off to the right because there's a cliff that goes straight up. You can't pull off to the left because there's a cliff that goes straight down. You're gaining on another truck really, really fast. And when you pull out to pass him, to your horror, you see another semi coming at you head on. What would you do? Leroy said, I'd wake up Jimmy. They said, who's Jimmy? Leroy said, well, Jimmy's my partner. He's asleep in the back while I drive, and I'm asleep while he drives. They said, okay. Why would you wake up Jimmy? And Leroy said, well, Jimmy's from a small town, and he ain't never seen nothing like what's about to happen. When the men and women in this room go back to your Lions Club, determined to lead toward a mission, not a meeting, with your heart on fire, determined to inspire your people with optimism and paint a bright future that they can join you in, and with a commitment to never stop. You've never seen anything like what's about to happen in your club, because you will not just have a club, you will have a movement, and you will be leading like lions. Thank you so much. God bless you guys. You're doing the Lord's work out there. Thank you so much. Go get them.